Hey guys, how are you? Yep, we're going to gate crash Diary of a CEO. Three other guests along were Steve Bartlett and a discussion what Trump's return really means in terms of the world and is the UK about to collapse. My best understanding is the three guests are all UK based and they have appeared, I assume, on Steve's show in other guises before. Full disclosure, top right, Daniel Priestley. I'm familiar with Dan. We've met before. We were in an entrepreneurs organization together. I was at peak powers and crashing, swanning around in my Bentley and losing all my money in the 2007, 08, 09 property crash with my property business. And Daniel was developing his current business that's gone on and upwards in a great trajectory. Congratulations to him. That's the only person that I've ever met or known. I know of bottom left name escapes me a tiny bit, but we'll get back to that. I've seen him on his show and it's a pretty interesting show. Top left is Scott, and let's just get the names correctly. Sorry, I can't not say Constantine's name. I know it's Constantine, I just wasn't sure of the surname. Kisin, and Scott Galloway, who I understand from watching this, there's a US citizen living in London and making his career there. Let's go and follow this, and I'm going to gate crash and overlay what I think goes unsaid and what I like that I hear, what I don't like so much that I hear that comes out of this particular discussion. We have to first start with what Trump's return really means for the world. So the question is pretty important. Is the UK about a collapse? This is very much left versus the first part. What Trump's return really means is very much playing within the left versus right political spectrum. That is a popular capture point as the ceiling for all discussions. Right at the top, there's a president and a political system, and you chose red or blue. That's the framing for it. It's not my favorite framing for truly understanding the fullness of all events. And my overlay is there's permanent government well beyond that are far more critical in terms of decisions and directions of geographic locations, technological advancements, and how they will be implemented and managed. The second part is the UK about to collapse? It's quite specific to the United Kingdom, and I have very specific thoughts on that I would like to share as well. But it actually goes into a bigger question that it's really not just about the UK, although the UK is at a particular pivot point that is pretty dire in my reflection. Okay, let's hear what the guys have to say. Let's let them talk. Let's record it, and then I am putting it on slightly faster play because they chatted for a long time. Whether we'll be able to do this critique for the entire video remains to be seen, because it could end up being a very long video. Let's hear the question and let's get started.
You guys are three of the best commentators, the most articulate people I know that also have the most interesting broad experience and also, I think, political background. So I wanted to talk to you about everything that's going on in the world, and I wanted to ask you guys some of the dumb questions that I ponder alone with myself and with my dumb friends in my WhatsApp group. It feels to me that the world is at a real moment of transition in many regards, so like social transition, cultural transition, economic transition, and I think the US has been a catalyst for all of that. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. We've got an American here, Scott. I think Scott's the only American here. We've got Constantine, we've got Daniel, who are two Brits, but spend a lot of time between America as well. And so I want to come to Scott first and ask Scott a question, which is a very big, broad question, which is from your perspective, Scott. You know, when I talk about this feeling of transition, that seems to be like almost inside my chest, that we're at a really historic moment. What is your analysis on this? What is the big picture here? What's happened over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months? And how is that going to impact all of us around the world?
Well, if you think of the U.S. as setting the tone economically and maybe even culturally for the West, there's definitely a reversion away from, people feel that quote-unquote wokeism, and I don't like to use that word, but I'll use it here, was this sort of overcorrection to systemic racism, and it began to cause more damage than it was, or cause more problems than it was solving. And I think there's been a serious kind of lurch back, if you will, whether it's executive actions declaring the border a state of emergency, stuff around saying that gender is a thing, there's male and female. And most of these issues, the actual American public supports. I would say on a more cynical level, America used to be a platform for prosperity, the protection of civil rights, the projection of women's rights and power and democracy abroad. And I would argue that it feels like a pretty quick transition to almost like I call it kleptocracy, but America's become a platform for acquiring wealth and then leveraging that wealth as a means or a proxy of power. And the ultimate example of that was the launch of two meme coins, the Trump coin and the Melania coin, the day before the presidency, such that this conversation could have already or might happen this week. And I'll finish here. President Trump, it's Vlad. We're thinking about stabilizing our currency or trying to send the outflows of our reserves. So we're thinking about pulsing in about 600 billion rubles into the Trump coin, which, based on my economist estimation, would take the value of it to a $20 or $30 billion market cap, making you one of the wealthiest men in the world, Mr. Trump. And none of this would be disclosable or transparent. Also, in unrelated news, we really appreciate you seizing arms shipments to Ukraine.
None of this would be disclosable. So there's a particular, still I would call center-left view. Anybody who takes 600 million rubles and buys on the blockchain a token and is party to pumping that token, I'm afraid to say all that, turning it into a USDT, because I'm imagining the Trump ruble cross exchange not so liquid. If Trump token was even liquid in dollar terms enough to accommodate 600 million in a short spell, would first have to be turned into USDT and then used to purchase, or USD, and then used to purchase via the blockchain on exchanges, which all have to declare all activity, never mind unusually sized activity that is IP addressed Russia. Even if it is using a VPN, they would be able to, probably some of them would be even potentially be able to detect that. But at the minute it goes into the blockchain, it is internet banking on the internet web, open source. So there's a lot of corruption. You don't need a pumpermental token that's owned by a politician to do it. It is interesting though, thought, and it just might be a short circuit to it, but the SEC or other forces could see and report on that, and there are a lot of people that are watching the blockchain. Anyway, minor comment on that, but he's kind of straight away going to this feels a little bit like the previous election, Russia, the leftist conspiracy theory. You'll see why I say conspiracy theory with regards to this person. A leftist conspiracy theory of Trump is under the influence of Russia. And this whole scenario seems to play into that. Again, it's very left versus right. It's the ultimate personalities are Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, formerly named Drumpf. Go see the lineage and history on that and understand a little bit more about ethnicity and everything as well. Let's hear the rest though.
Right. So I think we've gone kind of full kleptocracy is the way I would describe it.
Are you optimistic, Scott?
He's right for the wrong reason. That the whole world is kleptocracy. It is entirely captured, but not for the reason you illustrate. There's ultimate corruption at every level, in the military-industrial complex, the cancer-industrial complex, formerly known as pharma, the tech oligarchy, everything. That's entirely corruptible. Essentially, the tech oligarchy has supposedly funded Trump's run. In essence. But anyway, let's leave that opening statement hanging there, and let's hear what the others have to say.
Well, I'm a glass half empty kind of guy. I don't.
That's one thing we have in common, a glass half empty kind of guy. I'm going to have a little humorous sidebar on that. I'm absolutely a glass half empty kind of guy. All the potential is in that you have yet to achieve. If you've got half a beer, where's the other half? You already own the half that's in your glass. The masses are all a half full guy because there's this positivity culture only rather than a full assessment. The masses are invariably wrong, ask Mark Twain. There's so many reasons why what is yet to be achieved or what could still be as a capacity attained or the potential, the latent potential is all sitting in the emptiness, and the masses don't see that and they all say they're half full because they're positivity stressed people. In other words, they're told always be positive. And Demartini has shown it's almost impossible to always be positive. And actually to recognize the negative is to be able to recognize the positive. If you can't see night, you don't appreciate morning and day. But on that point, I agree. But again, I don't think for the same reasons as him.
I don't know if I'm just getting older, but no, I don't see a man convicted of sexual abuse or found liable who inspired an insurrection retaking the White House as a point of light for the American experience.
So this again is so deep, and this is going to show up quite a lot, and this is very party political. This is so deep in the left versus right and the political spectrum, as if these two people, Biden and Trump, that were running off against each other until it then became this Kamala and Trump, are actually the people that are making the decisions. Now, if you heard or saw Kamala Harris speak, he seems quite taken in with her, or quite impressed. I would say anybody who thinks anything material on a macro level that is being decided by her and Trump in terms of his coarseness and his brutality of statement, which is a little bit negotiation, it's a little bit entertainment, I think, as well. You should almost take that as stylistic rather than statement of fact. We're going to build a bridge. We're going to stop their ships in Panama. That is almost Comedy Central. And I think he knows that, and it's ironic. But even still, he doesn't have the intellect singly or to be making the big decisions either. And this keeps your understanding in the political pyramid. It's almost like, here's the thing. Here's the big old thing on how things work. You know, and you've got layers to the pyramid, and you're being kept in this layer. The foundation, by the way, is debt. I'll be coming back to that. There's other layers. Let's say, there's workers, and then there's your classes. British will relate to that, Americans and Australians less so. And then your presidents. You have your power systems, chief of police, your local heads, and then this is the president, the executive office type story. And you're being kept here. And I'm saying there's no one talking about the permanent government and the layers therein as well, because there's layers there too that don't dare ever risk being taken out of power, that control the issuance of money, the legacy families. And we never get there because it's the ground of conspiracy theories, apparently, when quite a lot is quite adamantly clear in terms of how the world works, and there are real patterns that are identifiable. And you're kept here. You're talking about the direction of nations and the effect of someone, and the ceiling is here. That's your ceiling. And everything that matters is there. Right there. And it's best to be, if there's one topic that should be handled top down, this is one that should. Because everybody else is order takers. They're not the salesman of a new idea. They've never had a new idea. They've told what ideas to implement. And this is such a minimize. It's like putting a rev limiter on a V12 Ferrari at 2,500 revs. You have no idea what that car's capable, even in first gear. You're never going to win a race. You're never going to get there. It just doesn't happen. There's this break. There's this big gap that you're not allowed to discuss that shows up right over here. Bang. And that's just pure air, and you're not allowed of playing any higher than this box. And that to me is peculiar. Anyway, he subscribes to that, it seems. Let's hear some more.
Constantine,
Yes.
I suspect you'd have a slightly different view on all of the above. How are you feeling about everything that happened yesterday? Did you watch the inauguration? What is your big picture, 30,000 feet view?
I think it's incredibly unwise to make bold predictions about what's going to happen over the next 6 to 7 months. I do think what America had at the election and what the election of Donald Trump represents is something that we in the UK don't have, which is choice. They had a very clear choice between two very different perspectives on the world, between two very different approaches, between two very different candidates. And
okay, so stylistically, on the surface, you had choice, but actually, that top bit of the pyramid had decided for the lead nation to take a pivot. And here's my take. You actually had very little choice. You were expected to vote for Trump. Kamala was expected to lose. Everything was done to ensure that largely happened. And the election cycle is a natural pivot point for the top part of the pyramid when they want to accelerate a different part of their existing agenda. And that agenda is mainstreaming of crypto, blockchain and digital money, digital biometrics, the massive advancement and coming forward of the tech oligarchy, which, by the way, that supported Trump, Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, Tesla boy elongated muskiness, and this whole quasi-business on the surface, but only not business, tech oligarchy that are absolutely data mining you to death, and it's a surveillance finance future, and to ensure an election never gets stolen again will be the political message. Everyone will have a biometric ID. Social media, biometric ID. Using the internet, a sign-on space. So what you do, say, and the language you use can be controlled, because that reverse inverts how you're allowed to even think. How you're allowed to use words and language. If you are curtailed from using certain words and language, a word you've never heard, Loxist, go look it up. The fact that you don't know there's a word called Loxist and what it stands for means you don't understand something. And the fact that you all know, let's say, anti-Semite, you all know that phrase, and you're all seeing, despite choice, all these stubborn initiatives by Keir Starmer, who's supposed to be diametrically opposed to Trump, and Trump himself, putting in legalese and laws against anti-Semitism. So you have two, Starmer and Trump, which are Starmer being attacked by the tech dog of Trump for various things, so that you think the cavalry is here. So you had stylistic choice. Yes, Constantine is right. In terms of the macro agenda, the flow that they are taking you on, the meandering bend, the meanders are and the bends are change of style, which usually is hand in hand. Oh, it's a new person, it's a new culture, there's new hope. And that this guy's going to save you. This time you voted yourself freedom. This time you're voting back the creeping statism of everything. This time you've stopped communism, coming at you. And he does all the top line cultural Marxist extremism and pushback, and you think, there you go, delivering promises, hope and change again. So I agree on style. I don't agree on the macro direction that has to have zigs and zags in it by design. And they plan the zig and the zag by virtue of timing it with electoral cycle so that they can keep you in the illusion of a political leader that you voted for enacted a change.
And ultimately, criticisms of President Trump are necessary and legitimate. Of course they are. But at the end of the day, I believe, having spent quite a lot of time in America around election time, and also just generally, and traveling around real America, not just in DC and LA and New York, the reason that he was elected was that the American people are not prepared to accept what Europeans have decided they're prepared to accept, which is managed decline. The American people...
I like that comment for one part. I don't like it. Sure. By the way, I was in America in the last 6 months myself. Did a conference. I was traveling around there. The Trump signs, the flags, you name it. They were all there in all the districts, the working class areas. Again, I wasn't New York or LA. I was in Florida. I was in different parts. I was going through the burbs, from Miami, Boca, which is very wealthy, into poorer areas. I saw it all. But I didn't see, the middle states, but I can imagine how it might have been. So sure, they had enough of the style. Most people vote, it's like a Big Brother contest. People vote for who they most see as their potential friend. This is a personality contest. It's never a character contest. It's never about principle. It's about personality. Some principles will hold in this particular instance, the rollback of the half transition men in women's toilets. Okay, you're going to get a little bit of a slowing down there for now, and all that went with. And some aspects did change. They need you to see. But these are initially, even though they're absolutely inflammatory, and they're the outrage, the source of great outrage marketing on X and all the social medias, whether you're left or right, they are the great source of it. In real terms, the long term, in terms of where they're taking you, nothing's changed. This is just one of the flexes where you get to breathe again. It's like waterboarding. If you're culturally anti the cultural Marxism, this is where your head gets pulled out of the water and you get to breathe again before you get dunked again. If you're a Democrat, it's the exact opposite. This is where you've been finished breathing and your head's been dunked back in the water, and this is pure pain for you. Neither are right. However, the last bit of what Constantine said about Europe in managed decline, 100% correct. I agree with him at every level. Germany, and the only thing he didn't, well, maybe the word managed is a little bit of a clue to that. But the only thing he didn't actually say, and I include UK and Europe particularly, and I would emphasize Western Europe, the major nations of Western Europe. I'm not projecting this on, Serbia or Bulgaria particularly. This is about France, Germany, Western Europe, down through Italy and the United Kingdom, Spain, etc., etc. But very specifically, the France-Germany axis, which is the axis of the EU experiment. It's absolutely in managed decline, and I quite like the word managed because then it shows to me he might be seeing this rather than being an act of incompetence. He's seeing it to be managed. The word says it. In other words, actually, it's turning into communism there. You're going from a socialist model, and we've said many times, this extreme level of socialism goes into communism. In Germany, it was the Green Movement. It got seriously radicalized and very strong. And as a result, you had Merkel cease nuclear power, which should be the cheapest, most efficient, and safest power, and most reliable. Because of 2011, the crisis in Fukushima, I've done clean talks about what happened there and what I suspect was further behind that. And it goes to a level that I'm not going to get into on this video. I'm probably not going to make YouTube anyway, I don't know. But that level is going to continue to show up. And I'm just going to point up there and say that level in terms of what went down in there. By the way, 6 months before, Westfield, the major American nuclear business, pulled out of Japan. By the way, there's never been 2 reactors that failed, and the one was not contingent on the other. They were self-contained and set apart. By the way, a security company put in camera works after a particular nation was supportive of Palestine. We'll leave that one there. But anyway, managed decline, cancelling nuclear in Germany, and then everything that's happened thereafter, allowing America and its allies to destroy the gas pipeline, the fact that there's still gas that could be bought from Russia, but because of the Ukraine-Russia crisis war, lots to be said on that too, but we'll not get into the weeds there, saw Germany effectively have such high costs of energy, and the same is happening in the UK, and Constantine makes some very good points on that later in this particular chat, is part and parcel why this is actively managed into decline. And they will tax more. The trajectory of Starmer is you already have rates higher than trust. So let's just do the UK element and get some of these things out. You already have rates higher than trust, interest markets on debt higher than trust when she was thrown under the bus with Kwasi Kwarteng. You have the millionaires leaving. We've covered this in our newsletter, 9,500 last year. And you have him winning a landslide and controlling Parliament largely, and told everybody up front he's going to tax them till the pipsqueak. He didn't use that phraseology, but his solution is tax and spend. This is a dyed-in-the-wool commie model that he's bringing. New Labour, played along with business and allowed the city to make big fat bonuses and didn't push tax up slowly, but didn't do what Starmer's intending to do. In a state of decline, declining manufacture, declining relevance as a financial service hub. Yes, it's still a beautiful place. Yes, there's great stores, but you have to have made your money and live in London. As a new growth point, it's not going to happen. And outside of London, wow, it's a different world. It's a different economy. But let's hear him on the managed decline of Europe, because I like that.
People do not want their country to become weaker. They do not want it to become poorer. They do not want to impoverish their fellow citizens through net zero. What they want is their country to be great, their country to be powerful, their country to be influential. The economic realities for most Americans are not really reflected in the figures that we are told. So when people talk about inflation, the reality of people's lives on the ground is that their cost of living has gone up very, very significantly.
I like this too. So Constantine's making back-to-back good points. And by the way, I'm going to critique and give praise, hopefully, on all of them to varying degrees, because whilst we're being contained in the ceiling and everything is answered levels up by the left-right framing of the question and by the first respondent's answer, which was very party political, what you in fact, it was very important to him to nail his colours on the door as a Democrat early And I just wouldn't have done that, even if I was one, which I'm not, and I'm not a Republican either, or a conservative or Labour supporter, as I've said. It's all above. But anyway, the facts of the matter is inflation is significantly higher than stated. So the numbers we get out of the US are surprisingly good generally in terms of growth and various things. Let me tell you, the true numbers you should be watching are rate of bankruptcies. The rate of bankruptcies making new high. The collapse of the commercial markets and debt in them, new highs. Allowances for collapse, new highs on commercial property investment. Yes, some people are paying more. That's for housing. Inflation is incredibly high. It's higher than what you're saying. But in real terms, it's quite possibly that the housing is not actually growing. There's a record number of new properties coming in. The new rate for a fixed deal is in and around 7% for most people on property, while those that bought those properties a decade ago might have been in the range of 2 to 3.5 during our nearly zero moments. How's affordability going to work out? And this is an important point because speaker number one, Scott, is going to reference we need to build more houses. It's too expensive for the next generation. Actually, you really need to deal with the major issue as to why asset prices as a whole. Did he not notice his stock market? Did he not notice housing? Did he not notice the cost of living? You are a monkey on a greased pole. In fact, in real terms, divided by gold ounces, your property's probably gone down quite a bit. But the affordability thereof has certainly gone up immensely. And the prospects for the next generation are certainly a lot worse. So I agree again with the point Constantine makes. It's not as rosy as America is being put out, but you're going to hear a big sales pitch coming on all things America. Love Americans, love UK members. We're very well supported. You're talking about 40% and 30% of our YouTube audience base. 70% sits there. The rest is, Australia, South Africa, Canada, English-speaking nations, and then the European where the language is good, Dutch, Scandis. That's our base. So I'm telling you, when I critique a country, please don't take this personally. It's about stats. It's about lies, damn lies, and statistics. And Constantine makes a
over the last few years, and that's not always reflected directly in the overall inflation figure that we're shown, because certain things are much more influential in people's lives than others. And so whether
to add to that, the Gini curve is the most hollowed out in the world in America, because you're going to get the sales pitch coming soon. In other words, the multiple of CEOs to street worker is ridiculous o'clock, and most of those CEOs I revert you to the top up there, that special place that we can't really talk about. And they will be sold to you as white males getting too much privilege. And you want to look a little deeper into the segment of that. But anyway, so the Gini curve is the most twisted. The working collar, the blue collar, are being hammered. And the middle is also being hammered. And the upper middle is feeling it too.
The decision to elect President Trump ends up being this positive thing for which there should be lots of optimism is a matter of the next 4 years. Are we going to see a presidency that really does everything it promises? And by the way, if you look at the things that Donald Trump is promising, I think whether you're left or right, you have to acknowledge that they are things that are worth doing. Having a secure border so that people don't come into your country illegally is a basic.
That is correct. People should have secure borders. So there are a couple of policies on the Republican agenda that I tend to concur with. The non-secure border argument that many of the Democrats have made, that you should just be a porous sponge for unlimited, unskilled labor. Now, who, because we're going to hear about the grooming gangs in the UK, who brought these people in? How's it they were let in at such numbers? And who is actually letting the same thing happen in America? Which agencies for immigration are greasing the palms in Panama, in South America? You've got the Panama Gap there. You're going right the way through, letting them through the borders. Who is making it almost impossible? I need to fill in ESTA forms. I get checked if I travel to America. I'm skilled. I have high net worth, and I can, you really have to go a legal visit and don't dare stay over. But the people were just being shipped in at the bottom. Which active decision was that allowed that? And why is it so prevalent in North America, a predominantly white European place, and Western Europe and the UK. Why are these the nations? Does Israel take the same percentage that America has taken or Germany has taken in terms of the immigrants' profile? Unskilled, needing instant welfare on arrival, and offering, these things largely just for existing, a welfare state on that. Why is it that these nations have been identified, and is this random to people like the first speaker, or is it pattern behavior of orchestration to people like me?
Basic duty of government. Economic prosperity is a basic duty of government. Withdrawing America from a kind of simultaneously aggressive but weak posture around the world, where America sort of says, yeah, we're going to get involved in these foreign conflicts, but we're not actually going to then practically help Ukraine win that war, is a kind of stupid position on both, whichever side you're on. So on all of these things, and of course, Scott mentioned wokeness. I think he's absolutely right that there is a massive backlash happening around the world, because lots and lots of people who were completely apolitical until the last 3 or 4 years.
So on the half in a war, half not, get in as many as you like, but don't do any of them well to conclude it. That is the policy of the top triangle, typically under Democrats and Republican strategies, because it is an open vein in the dying body to take blood from the American people. They proliferate fiat, they pass on inflation, they create a debt bomb, they have their bungs and back kickers in a very dark state, must keep it secret, dealing with a military-industrial complex, buying arms at ridiculous prices, all knocked up with a Bertie bonus for the dark state, shares owned by, predominantly owned by people that are part of, that stand behind, and legacy families that stand behind the likes of BlackRock, that owns large segments of the entire S&P 500 index, and has been dictating this policy of DEI, immigration, etc., transgenderism, the cultural Marxism, and has a 100% board of, refer to the thing that may not be seen or mentioned. In the case of BlackRock, who's been super dominant and actually has Larry Fink's state equivocally, and watch and him say it if he's not one of the most powerful men, who has all your proxy votes for those equities that he's buying with your tracker money that's put in his funds, that bullies the CEOs and makes changes, tells them what policies they must be pushing, etc., says people need to be coerced and pushed. A dictatorship works better. These are people who like communism, like dictatorship, and see themselves as a ruling class. So that's kind of super, also very, very relevant. Now, the notion that Trump's done these things and you should all praise Trump. They decided that they pushed it to a certain extreme there, and they're going to pivot on the way back. The agenda is one of snaking to the left and the right and bringing you back, and then attaching a personality. That hand is apparently on the wheel. This is all theater. This is a Punch and Judy show. You're either the policeman swinging the trump, the truncheon, and hitting the poor guy on the head, or you're the poor guy's fan. But you're not recognizing that my left hand cannot physically beat up my right hand. It is part of the same unit. It can happen, and I'm self-destroying, and I'm putting on a facade and claiming victimhood on the one hand, and then saying justifiable preemptive action on the other, etc., It's all controlled at the same level. Anyway, more from
years, or meant to make me until 2016, just feel like the world has gone crazy, and suddenly they're supposed to pretend that men can change sex and become women, and now they're entitled to be in female prisons. And if your teenager says that they are the opposite sex, you're supposed to...
That's how they secured the election win. So once they'd gotten Biden in, and they thought, we need 4 more years, we're going to strip money out on the debt markets, we're going to push this and push that, then we'll pivot in 4 years' time, and we know we've got the whole electorate. Any reasonable person is going to vote against the cultural Marxism that has been inflicted on women. So the destruction of men has inflicted pain on women. Nobody has benefited. You've been serfed them out of the inflation. The men are having to all bow and take a knee, and being the patsies in every Netflix movie. You've destroyed male avatars. You've got real problems with the male youth living in the basement, playing gamers, totally virtualified, can't generate alpha, The daughters are doing swimmingly well with various jobs where uni spaces are made readily available to females, not to, particularly I'm talking white male here, but it's males generally as well. These are all, that's how you control everyone to backlash vote and get them to show up at the polls. They obviously would. Everyone's going to say that was garbage. No one was applauding what the Democrats doing, apart from a small niche of people, New York and California, little parts of LA, the Hollywood movie stars that get paid to and get real great movie parts and roles and paid millions for doing a movie, but whose kids just all happen to need gender reassignment and other mutilation to make it look cool, like when Leonardo was driving the Toyota Prius, and that made them all cool and they all had to get one. The followers, most people, this is what I've learned, most people in the world are followers. They create avatars and heroes for you to follow. Everyone loved Steve Jobs. Oh, it must be Apple. Everyone loved Elon when he came up saving the planet, virtuous, buy a Tesla. There's a lot of that, and Daniel was quite big on that. He would chase that. And he campaigned for Hillary, by the way, in 2016 in terms of politics there, but he's been more guarded on his politics today. Then you have the vaccine aspect, which I don't know if we'll be allowed to even say anything, and it doesn't come up here, so I'll just leave that. But certain people sat on that, and I've mentioned their names. Others were a bit more skeptic, and I think Constantine was a bit more skeptic. And I imagine speaker number one, Scott, was probably all masked up and good to go.
To chop their breasts off and all this other stuff that ordinary people just look at and go, this is crazy. Like, I am liberal, but this isn't liberal. This is some kind of weird thing that's going on. And I see the
weird thing. If you study your history, it's Weimar Republic, Berlin before Hitler. Weird thing. As in, hire the mum and the daughter for sex, pedophilia, and those were the books that were being burned, by the way. But anyway, that sounds like Nazi apologism. So we better be careful.
The backlash against all of that all over the Western world. And I think Donald Trump signifies that people are fed up of that. And I have been warning for a very long time that if the woke left continues to exercise this level of influence on our public debate, the reaction will be the rise of the right. And Donald Trump is one of the most diplomatic
and what he was warning is what actually Dark State absolutely wanted and absolutely knew already. So all you're warning is people at your level and below. You're not influencing anything upside. It is exactly as it was meant to be, the truth be told. And that's how they engineered term 2 for Drumpf.
Pleasant versions of what you're likely to get if the left keeps going crazy. We will see what challenges the world throws at him over the next 4 years and whether he's capable of responding to them.
Scott, has the left lost its way, in your view? And if so, how did that happen? And just to respond to some Constantine's points about Trump being the best sort of right-wing collective, are we going to see right-wing sort of ideology spread throughout the Western world over the coming years? What's your take on all of the above?
No, you definitely, we Democrats, we get it right, and then we just go too damn far. And so I look at, I'm a professor on campus. DEI, 60 years ago, there were 12 black people from Princeton, Yale, and Harvard combined. That was a problem. Race-based discrimination actually makes sense. This year, more than half Harvard's freshman class identifies as non-white. But 70% of those non-whites come from dual-income homes in the upper quintile income earning homes. The academic gap between black and white used to be double what it was when rich and poor. It's now flipped. So DEI was a good idea, but frankly, it's not insane. Now it just represents the same racism that was trying to do away with. So, and then we created two candidates who were the only candidates that make each other viable. Vice President Harris, given the hand she dealt with, the best she did. I think President Biden should be buried in a crypt entitled Narcissus. Vice President Harris, given the hand she dealt with, did the best she did. I think President Biden should be buried.
Wow. Is that your assessment of her mental and competence level? Did you listen to any of her speeches? Wow, that's an interesting take.
Buried in a crypt entitled Narcissus, who decided that it made sense for him to go back on his pledge to be a transition candidate and gave us a British-style election timing on the Democratic side without, in a marketplace where you need time and money. So it was not, we did not have a great candidate. There is an understandable swing back from what is an overcorrection around some of these issues. Parents, we gave them a huge issue with transgender rights. There's more Cadell players in California than transgender people, and yet
That's a stat. I don't even know what a pedal is, but you know, I'm little educated. The fact and the point I've always made is, why is 0.0 whatever percent being the predominant social and cultural discussion, and being allowed to upset women are actually over 50%, young girls is over 50% generally, the better half, and by virtue of that reaction, the other half as well, just by weaponizing this mutilation for someone probably going through teen years. Go and see suicide numbers of transgender. Go and see people that regret the operations after they've taken them, that gets zero coverage. Go and see how this is being promoted. How was this aberration even allowed? And that's not to say there might be absolutely, at the absolutist point, someone who really does get on better being that. But why is this the defining social aspect? It's a fraction. It's like me focusing on the weight of the world being that peanut on the pavement. It is just irrelevant. It's by scale of everything else that needs focus. Why was this such a strong thing? Well, the Democrats wanted it. It's outrage. And they're also normalizing you to the inversion, perversion that was symptomatic of Weimar Berlin. And they are intending to blur gender lines. They are intending to go from transgenderism to transhumanism. There is a book written about it by a greatly awarded man that then transitioned to a woman. You can go look up that very title and get the name, the original name and the later name. It is a gender specific, but I'm a conspiracy theorist. So most of what he said there, in terms of the overreach of the left getting a slap back, I don't disagree with per se. But let's hear some more.
The Democrats decided to conflate it with the civil rights movement and think that it was okay for a woman who transitioned, a transgender woman, to enter a bicycle race and finish 5 minutes before everybody else. And then we all bark up the same tree and decide that it's inspiring. And parents all over the nation are saying, we've literally gone crazy. Where I would disagree a little bit with Constantine is that America choosing economic growth.
Hear a Democrat that actually admits that's insane. It seems they do exist. We didn't hear too many of these voices while it was all happening because it was their guy. Where were all the Democrat voices that were saying the same? Some flipped and voted or didn't vote Democrat. Some flipped and voted for Trump. I don't know. Maybe they are there, but you didn't hear too much of that. It certainly wasn't given airplay in mainstream media.
And prosperity. There are 190 sovereign nations in the world. 189 would change places with America over the last 4 years.
Okay, so here comes the American supremacism that I deal with a lot. And I'm here to tell you it's because it's planned that way for now, and it won't always be so. But listen to this. And this is a ream of strats. And this guy's, he's retained an immense amount of data. He's an eloquent speaker. He's erudite. And, it's all to hand and he can recall it. That would challenge my memory, actually, on many things, just to regurge what you're about to listen. But this is American supremacism, and I want to talk to you about something that I'm going to define before he says what he's about to say. It's called nation stating. And that is inherently a silo analysis approach. You have mighty America here. It's one big silo. And then you've got struggling old UK here, silo. And then you've got Western Europe here. And then you have other countries. China's regularly battered by Western media. You'll have other Far Eastern nations. You'll have the Commonwealth, Australia, Canada. This is silos. And then a lot of characteristics and cultures are attributed to nation states. Now, there are cultures that are specific to nation states. But what most people don't realize is that the forces that are orchestrating everything are transnational, and they are fluid, and they can show up anywhere like genies, and they operate across the tops of all these boxes. They go like this. Maybe made it a bit too low. There you go. Transnational. And no one is talking about the mercantilist, tertiary extracting, banking cartel to any meaningful degree that always seems to get bailed out, that socializes its losses and capitalizes its mega gains That sees massive currency devaluation. That sees huge bonuses for them. A lot of the 08-09 crisis, the dot-com crisis, the CV19 crisis, where Amazon was still able to deliver and got news plots and of all they were doing to ensure no viruses were spread if you bought packages, while small, medium enterprises that might have sold that same product were shut down. Nobody mentions the corporatized technocracy that actually is all conjoined beating and raping you. The gang rapists, the rape gang that you're going to hear about in the UK, the global gang rapists are the mercantilist classes of the technological fascist corporates, the military industrial corporates, the energy oil industrial corporates, the military, the army and the states, and the dark states, the secret services. And who controls them? Right at the very, very top square. Go and ask in the mystery box. Let me know in the comments if you know what my mystery box is all about. Transnational across all of them. And you're going to hear about how doubly awesome compared to everywhere else. Now, I'm the first to say they've created a culture that's you can go open bank accounts. People want to help. People are excited by entrepreneurs. That's great. They've done that in the US. It's the same for white South Africans. You don't get hired out there, but they don't have the scale. They don't have venture capital. They don't have banking. They don't have anything like that. It's the same in other cultures. I'm here in Australia. They're quite go-getter here. Maybe not as much, a little bit of egalitarian. But here's the thing. All these tech mega corps didn't actually just turn from garages that never got funded, that had to really go slow and organically grow all the way through. These things were planned, seeded, and turbocharged like you've never seen before, given jet fuel and pumped up for the purposes they ended up serving, because the end goal is all these corporates are the technological, financial surveillance grid, biometric grid. That is the capture, and we'll get into AI and everything else that is being discussed in this program. But these are the enemy. These are the parasitic forces that are getting government contracts to build data servers, AWS, Microsoft, all of these guys. And where does the government get that money? They're spending nearly twice in America what they get in. They are spending twice what they get in on a big nation with a large middle class, and they're still spending twice what they get in, and a lot of that money is going for the future digital prison on contracts to the technocracy that I've just mentioned, from Google right the way through the devices, Android, Apple, you name it. And the notion that the only place in the world where you could start a unicorn company is a garage in California is an absolute perversion. It was seeded to be that way. It was seeded to be that way. There are smarter people, as you'll hear, in Oxford in terms of tech. ARM was a chip company that was bought, but it didn't have the scale, it didn't have the venture capital, the financial engineering machine is all in New York. That's why you lost Cadbury's in Britain. That's why ARM got bought out as a chip maker from American companies. This is how it all works. It's much, much more than all the brightest talents. We're just special. It is an entire machine, and that machine is on borrowed time because of the debt crisis that we talk about often. So it's not going to continue forever. Now, bear that in mind, the nation statism of awesomeness, because he's just said there's 189 nations that would die to be America. Let's go and hear more on this story.
Parents all over the nation are saying, we've literally gone crazy. Where I would disagree a little bit with Constantine is that America choosing economic growth and prosperity, there are 190 sovereign nations in the world. 189 would change places with America over the last 4 years. We hit 71 new record highs in the markets. 97% of all
stock market all-time highs is the benchmark for citizen happiness in a Gini curve hollowed out like that, where you have virtually trillionaires just about. You have trillion market caps. We know the legacy families are trillionaires, but the official rich list you're given are hundreds of billions. Supposedly Elon Musk did this all by himself, isn't backed, isn't just a front man. He runs every single one of those companies. What a dynamic guy. He does it on 100 hours a week and lives on balloon juice and is taking us to Mars, and all the other parables of garbage that you get peddled by that. These are front men. These are front men that were back. They had bottomless overdrafts. Amazon didn't make a profit for the better part of nearly 2 decades. They had a bottomless overdraft to build the biggest goddamn thing. Who gave them that? Who allowed them to keep running losses? How was it even possible? So let's hear more about this exceptionalism, this American exceptionalism.
We created more market capitalization in 7 months.
So stock market high, sorry, I wanted to say it before. We've created more market cap, more that. That's because right now you've been allowed to be the formation of capital center, LA and Hollywood. That's where the blue horizontal internationalists are building their grid for the whole globe. You just got to be the construction site. Don't take it on you just being that more awesome in your gene pool. There's something about America, it's in the water, we're just unbelievably awesome. No, the parasite lives there and is building its machine there. And it needs major scale, it needs high market caps, because some talented guy builds a better rival somewhere else in India, in Bombay, or in London, or Dubai. You can wade in and gobble it up, either crush it or adopt it. That's how the world works. Bullies. You are the capital bullies of the planet. That's how it's been designed. That's why the higher valuations on tech companies are in the US, because you can gobble anything up that's good. It's currency, your share value. Some new small cap that is unbelievable technology that far exceeds yours will not have the same PE ratio. You'll enrich your PE by buying the lower PE and assuming all their revenues. Instant value add. Merger and acquisition is instant value add when you have a higher PE than anyone else. The equity listing is currency. Your debt markets are absolutely collapsing. You've gone from 0.3% on the 10-year that you will mention soon to nigh on 6%. That is why your currency is firmer than everything else. It's driven by interest rates. Your debt market is collapsing. You, in terms of paying interest rates in the world, the combination of debt that you have and the rate you pay sees you as by far the largest interest rate pay to the tertiary extracting legacy families that were given the privilege to be the people that created your money. And you're talking about awesomeness.
Radius, that's the International Airport. And Europe's traded in the last 20 years. We have the lowest inflation in the G7. We disagree a little bit with Constantine. Is America choosing economic growth and prosperity? There are 190 sovereign nations in the world. 189 have changed places with America over the last 4 years. We hit 71 new record highs in the markets. 97% of all AI. We created more market capitalization in a 7-mile radius of Basel International Airport. And Europe's traded in the last 20 years. We have the lowest inflation in the G7. We have the highest growth.
The lowest inflation in the G7. Here's another guy who's never heard of shadow stats. Never heard of shadow stats. By the measure of Ronald Reagan in 1982, which has been changed countless times to adjust and mask the inflationary effect, which includes shrinkflation, putting things that look the same that are smaller sized, every trick in the book. You have mastered skullduggery in statistics to a degree that puts forward the greatest lie that's ever been told. The second greatest lie has ever been told. Some of you will wink and know what I just said. The second biggest lie that's ever been told is your inflation story, my friend. You are not the lowest inflation at all.
We've grown 10% since 2020. That's triple the rate of Europe. Biden
was... Growth means nothing. GDP means nothing. He's going to say, how can a guy like this say GDP means nothing? Growth means nothing when you are a consumer nation and everything you consume gets put on a tab that you're never going to pay. And if you gross domestic product is always equivalent to gross consumption, economic consumption. So you can't put production. You can't put it down as productive activity being the biggest consumer and the biggest throwaway nation. You don't get that. GDP is actually not a successful measure of happiness and economic efficiency. And when you add inflation, that is being grossly understated, for the third and fourth time I state this, of course you can have a higher number. You tell a
was unable to communicate any of that effectively because there's this psychological dynamic that when your wages go up, you credit your own grit and character, and when the price of cereal goes up, you blame the president. Now, similar to the future, or what?
Unable to communicate that they've done this amazing economy. I actually have to just stop right here, and I just have to take this whole bullshit down, because this is cream bullshit. This is the Biden era. I've already annotated this, and I think now's the time for this. We must look at the scale on the respective y-axes. So there's an x and y axis here. And this is Q1 2022, 2020, and through to the end of 24. So you've essentially got the full 22, the full 23, the full 24. You've got 3 of the 4 years. US federal receipts, the dark blue. The dark blue. Let me go dark blue on this. This is what you get in. That is this Manhattan there. That Manhattan there. This Manhattan there. For each quarter, you get what I'm saying. US federal outlays, that one. US federal outlays is this, that, and that. And the Biden-Harris economy, I've put in circled dotted zone the degree of over expenditure to income. Now, let me tell you something, guys. Let me tell you something. If I give you a bottomless credit card and say, dude, you're earning 100K, but go and live like you're earning 250K. Are you going to look good? Are you going to have an amazing flipping house? Are you going to have a Lamborghini? Are you going to have a special 4x4, a boat, a jet ski, and great holidays to London, Switzerland, whatever the case may be? If I give you the right to manage your finances like this, there is nothing. They were given a great economy. They were delivering. How can you sit there? The Democrats. I mean, this is, I could go apoplectic here. It's like Comedy Central. How can you sit there and say you hit 71 highs? In a market which is making new highs, you could get a market that hits a new high 200 times. You know, each day it goes marginally high. It doesn't matter. It's what's the absolute it's done versus real inflation, which you don't have a benchmark for. You have the fake number that comes out of your Bureau of Statistics, which is very much like your non-farm payrolls number that I watch and monitor every month, which is about this booming economy that suddenly lost well over 1 million claimed jobs. That every time they give you a big number and it hurts, they restate 3 months later quietly in the footnotes. The fake stats game. The fake stats game is what we've got here. And this guy's telling you what a great economy, and now it was Biden's fault for not communicating that, when everyone in the flattened out Gini curve that goes like that, hundreds of billions, right down, hollowing out of middle class, big long tail of barely making it, gig economy, multiple jobbers delivering flippin' pizzas. And your government is overspending like that. There's no new airports of any significance to report. The Miami roads were filthy with tire carcasses and old concrete with seams that bounced along like that. It looks worse than when I was there before. You have not built any infrastructure. You've fought a war and given a shit ton of money to goddamn Israel and someone called Zelensky, up top right corner, that's running Ukraine in this kind of war with Russia, and that's how much you've expended, and your citizens feel poorer, and you're saying it's the best economy that it's ever been. How can you say that when you have handed a 7 trillion rollover in debt in Trump's first year, 2025? Yellen, the spender par extraordinaire, Granny Yoda Yellen, the Treasury head that was supposed to be a Fed head that was impartial, that turned out to be a Democrat Treasury head, that went spendathon mad, when the rates were low in 21, when you just won goddamn election, could have put all this excess expenditure she was putting and rolled it out on 30-year debt at much lower rates, chose to put it on short-term, 3-year, 4-year, etc., on slightly lower rates, because if you borrow short, it's a little bit cheaper, but only just, didn't put any of it long-term, created an absolute wall of rollover debt that needs renewing. An absolute wall of rollover debt that needs renewing all in 2025, and tell me that it wasn't expected to be that the Republicans were catching the next election and that this isn't managed. How would you, if you were expecting a second term under a doddering, demented fool that doesn't know which way to get off a flippin' plane and which staircase to go up and down, hasn't made any decision apart from what time's his goddamn nap. How could you actually think that was going to be a second term and your treasury would do that? And you stand there and tell me about this amazing bequest. Every American president has worsened, most instances, the debt situation generally since Volcker. But nobody has done so much additional debt and so much terrible planning on duration that turned winning this election into the poison chalice that Trump probably doesn't yet understand, but has tweeted enough about it regarding bankruptcy. Because you have a wall of rollover plus a negative income nation that is still spending more than it needs and will need to borrow again in those same markets in an environment where the rates are going nothing but up because your debt is collapsing. But you'll brag about your strong dollar and your strong economy. What a delusion. This is delusional stuff. This is non-economic commentary. And it's kind of frustrating to have to deal with. This is very kind of a bit typical of leftist ideology. You know, we did great because we spent. It's like an overdraft. Oh, but we made it up. It's okay. We spend more. It's a tax and spend. It's like the labors of previous year that ended up in the 3-day week. You know, in the cruel 60s and 70s and the end of mining and manufacture in Britain. I mean, you literally destroyed the end of British Leyland, the end of everything. That was the labor. It's this, yeah, we spend more, we give more away, we spend more.
How William Gibson described the future, it's here, it's just not evenly distributed. Prosperity is unprecedented in the U.S. over the last 4 years. It just wasn't evenly distributed. Now,
okay, first reference I'll have to give him credit for. It's not evenly distributed. It's called the Gini curve. And it doesn't need to be evenly distributed. It should be correctly distributed according to contribution. And there should not be such a multiple of scaled relevance for being a professional hired manager in the C-class strategy that sees the multiples that you get. Especially when they didn't entrepreneur those companies. They are professional management. They didn't found and create it. And many of the founders that are being put in front of you were actually backstopped by dark state slush fund money anyway. So you don't truly have real capitalism in America. You have kleptocracy. You absolutely do. And you have these big billion, trillion market cap companies that were essentially planned with government cooperation and dark state cooperation. But at least he pointed out that it's not evenly distributed. So we'll give him a point of credit for that. But otherwise, miles off the mark.
Now, having said that, in America, you can stop working in August and you've produced more and made more money than you have in Europe.
So this is nation statism. We are more awesome than you. So I live in this world where people are saying the least dirty shirt in the laundry, the least sick horse in the glue factory. I don't even understand that one. Since when are we making glue out of horses' hooves or whatever we're doing? This carries on in that we can trash everything, but you know what? We're less bad than that one. This is such rationalization of being deeply wrong and broken. No, we need to fix it and get right and straight and go back to sound money. No, we're just less bad than Europe. Look how better our matrix is. It's a funded, captured capital market in the US. Everything in terms of assets is hyperinflated. It's because that's where they built the grid that's being lowered over the whole world's goddamn head. And all your stats are professionally arranged to be even bigger lies than China's stats, and that's saying something.
Year. And it has gotten better. It says things are less bad than anywhere in the world in the US. Biden was unable to communicate it, and then talking about how great the economy is.
Biden was sitting on a golden economic age that he failed to communicate. Well, he couldn't communicate. He's incapacitated. He was the worst in the debates the first time he was put to run in the Democratic primaries, but he was chosen because he's controlled. He's probably 100% blackmailable. He's a known quantity because of the Obama years. He's 100% blackmailable. He's probably done god-awful things. His relationship with children in the manner and the body language, I don't need to know or have seen anything to know. It's deeply unsavory and unhealthy. There's so much that could be said about him that's speculation and unfounded, and you'll call it center-right, conspiracy theories or Nazism or anti-Semitism or whatever you want to call anything you like. That guy was captured. He was 100% captured. They had a chance to look at him and they thought they'd keep him on. There was nothing he did to win that debate. And actually, he didn't win the election, which this guy says is an absolute conspiracy theory. You'll hear it. Not fairly, anyway. And that's not me being pro-Trump. I don't want any of these politicians. That whole argument about suspect in the election is a ruse to ensure biometrics for future elections, which is how they will crowbar you into the digital identity game. Trump is going to bring it. The right is going to bring all the prison aspects. The left is there to enrage, you react, and while you think your guy's in and your back is turned, the prison gets downloaded. You've already heard Ellison say how they're going to do cancer vaccines with mRNA. Can't you just wait for all of that? How did all these kid cancers suddenly come? I bet you don't have any idea. I bet you think it was all random and organic. Hey, wow, man.
When rents were skyrocketing, tuition was going up, it was an ineffective strategy. But I don't think it's fair to say Americans chose prosperity. We have prosperity. I would argue that, quite frankly, some of the Republican ideals around deficit spending, which are nothing but taxes on future generations pulled forward.
How can he talk about deficit spending? How can you talk about Republicans on deficit spending? They both did it. They both liars. It just goes to different people for different seasons. That is Democrat deficit spending. That is income versus expenditure. Look at this quarter 3 in 22. Who was president? Do you have any idea of the facts? Do you have any segment of notion of idea of the facts? It's comedy. It's comedy gold. And the problem here is you've got a guy who speaks well, is very erudite, decided on what politics he is, plays in the left-right politic game, keeps you from seeing the higher game, and talks with incredible confidence without a single... I've got one chart that debunks him. One single chart. And it's all sourced, by the way. That's the next thing that... Oh, where's it sourced? Where's it sourced? Your own treasury, run by Granny Yoda Yenen. Source, US Treasury and Haver Analytics, in case you're going to ask. Okay, mate, are you happy now? You spent like drunken fucking sailors, like lunatics. You were throwing cash onto the fire to create heat on the room. Do you understand what you did? You are completing the debt-based collapse that I've busy started off telling you about. How can you sit there and be so ignorant?
I mean, we'll see how that works. But his signature policies, a clampdown on immigration, tariffs, these things are wildly inflationary. So Constantine's right.
So a clampdown on immigration of the variety that they were experiencing. Hey, South America, empty your jails. Here's Hebrew Refugee Society to show you the way, and your free phone and SIM card to find your way through the Mexican border. That immigration is not inflationary at all. In fact, the welfare spending to house home and do that was inflationary on your regime and watch as a Democrat under Biden. And putting them in hotels and paying that, who do you think pays for that? You don't have enough tax revenues to pay it. Did you see how you were spending? Did I mention that chart by any chance? You paying for that, future debt expenditure will be paid to home the criminals, and some of them will be not criminals, some of them will be criminal, low-skilled welfare surfers coming to your country that will be put up in B-grade hotels, that your commercial property market collapsing is probably going to seed future sites to this slum that you're building. That's inflationary, mate. That's inflationary. They're not going to stop MBA with a specialist programming qualification that's already on £250,000 in the UK and is coming for a $500,000 salary and bonus for coding. That's not going to stop an Indian with a visa that's a specialist coder in Python. That's not going to stop them. So wrong on that count. Tariffs, right. He's 100% right on tariffs. Tariffs is a tax on your own citizens. What is a tariff? It's essentially sanctions. You're going to sanction someone else and levy a charge on them, on another nation. But the cost of that sanction, if you stop China, for example, they're not going to cut their price to still provide food in Walmart. The margins are thin. The prices in Walmart will go up. So goods from China into Walmart will go up because Trump will be sanctioning China and everyone will be chanting USA, USA, USA. Geez, it's getting expensive down at the Walmart. These guys have got to make the same margin. China ain't working for 3. They're minting more millionaires than America is minting in a year. They mint in a month. That's what's really happening. They can afford to give 15,000 millionaires who are all still working for China when they come to your country and organizing sales and pipeline that will be the future Belt and Road. They are the manufacturer of everything. Your manufacturing has been decimated. You're going the way of the UK. You have lost a large part of your manufacturing. So tariffs are inflationary, but I don't know if you know how to explain it. Unskilled labor coming to largely squat on your welfare service on an open-ended, huge volume basis that are bringing crime, greater needs for policing, and all of those are strains and inflationary on you. Absolutely true. The tariff policy, I absolutely don't get. It's a clever way of confusing everybody that they're going to bring in inflation. What does inflation do? Push interest rates up. What does interest rates going higher do? Debt market valuation collapse, devaluation of your debt. America is the fastest collapsing debt market nation at the moment and is paying in absolute terms the highest in terms of interest rates and volume of debt. Yes, Japan has a higher percentage per GDP. They don't have 5% rates that they're paying at, my friend. And it's all owned by the Japanese.
It's going to be difficult. You don't know what's going to happen, but it feels to me, I would argue that my favorite appointment in the Trump administration, the adult in the room, is the 10-year bond, which is going to say, sorry, girlfriend, when I believe the president tries to implement some of these economic policies.
Constantine, is that?
That's actually fascinating. He's gone and mentioned the US tenure. Let's go and have a look at the tenure. I happen to have it up every time. I always have it up, even if I knew he was going to say that. I have the USD tenure up. In fact, I just changed it for the dollar index because I was checking the currency. It's this tab over here. Where's index? Index. I did a metals video. Let's go and do it. US tenure. Just had it up. So he mentioned the US tenure. Well, hang on a minute. Your Democrat government has just finished being in power. Let's see how the US tenure did under the Democrats, shall we? Let's have a little look. Well, it's broken up and you can see it's going higher. And he's only just taken charts. Let's see. When did they come in? 2020. Let's go weekly. Let's see what happened under Biden and the Democrats. That's CV19 and the printathon of money. This is the call we made. The all-time call we made was the end of the debt market bull, bonds as an investable asset. It is no longer a reserve asset. They've ripped the ring. The mercantilist extractors have borrowed so much, excessively made themselves into billionaires, funded the future digital prison, and as a result, we're getting to a point where now this was a final capitulation low. This is the yield. Remember, the valuation is the opposite. It's inverted, and this is where you are on this. So Democrats came in 2020 and ended 24. Let's have a look how you were talking. So Democrats started here, and they ended. Let's do this with me, guys. Facts are, you dropped that in. But, I mean, does he look at it? Hold on. Here's 2020. Trump was 16 to 20. Let's see how that did. Let's see how it did. 2020 to 24. There's your Democrat. There is your Democrat interest rate response in a price discovery market for debt. The value collapsed down. The interest rates gone from 0.3 to where we are now, 4.668, just off localized highs, breaking out of a falling wedge to run 5% in Trump's presidency and beyond. What does that look like in terms of valuation as debt? The 60-40 portfolio is dead. The 60% equity, 40%, it is absolutely dead. TLT is a long-term debt. It's a good proxy. It's an ETF of long-term debt. This is how the valuations of debt since Biden have gone. This is your asset class. I'm sorry, you want to mention equity markets making 71 highs. What does it matter if it's 71 or one high and it's the last day of the year and it gone up 50%? The number of highs is a bizarre matrix. You could say what percentage it did. Here is the valuation of debt at its low and at checkout. The TLT fell from 170. Let's get the exact high accurately here, because we're gonna base our arguments on facts if other people don't. The high was 179.70. You've come all the way down to barely 87. Now, let me tell you something about bond markets. They're slow and boring and pay you a minor yield. That's how they work. You've had a 40-year bull market. Biden, Democrats, and the CV19 response of 2020, because I don't politicize this like he is, but because he's a Democrat and he's going to say what an awesome economy they left, has seen the value of debt on an ETF that is structured with long-term debt, 20 plus and 30 plus years. By the way, a lot of the recent debt, as I've already explained, has been put on shorter term to bring it all into a roll on 2005. Square that circle, saw the values fall from 180 right the way down to 87. You've literally more than halved. Now, let me just tell you, debt markets don't move like that. Debt markets are dull, slow, and therefore stability. And they get a little bit more of a bid in a bad equity market year when people are a bit scared, they go into debt. And they get a tiny bit of yield thrown their way. You got a lot of yield when it was Volcker year because he killed the Vietnam War debt that Nixon that wanted to start on Kennedy, that LBJ was probably the most responsible for. And that is literally the escalator of increasing in value of debt, and it turned there. It literally turned in 2020. You want to mention stock market highs in a devaluating currency environment, and you sit and look at your own debt that's lost over 50%. This is the escalator up and the elevator down. This is debt-based collapse. Why do you think gold is doing what it is, the canary in the mine? Why are you not dividing all your assets by gold ounces? The dollar and the debt markets are telling you they're in collapse. And that's not the dollar against euros. It's not the dollar against pounds. It's going to have a super spike of strength. It's going to be the least dirty shirt in the laundry. That's by design. It's not because of anything you're doing. You're actually the largest dirty shirt in the laundry. And the dirtiest. You need to go into a special machine. They're going to wash all the others out first. That's the truth. Because you have the Chiffin's dilemma at its extreme, which is you are a net exporter of dollars in lieu of receiving goods. Therefore, you are a net proliferator, and you've taken it to an extreme that no one will lend to you at the value rates anymore. And people are seeking out gold as a reserve asset because it doesn't die on them. In the Biden presidency, gold has gone up while your bond portfolio at the peak has lost over 50%. That's the truth. He who dares bring up the 10-year. I'm sorry. This is a classic case of pan-American supremism. We get a little bit out of Brent Johnson on the dollar milkshake, China bad, all of this. Let me tell you, China stole all our tech. China in BYD and battery companies are doing things Americans are still waiting to get to. In terms of power, they are building more nuclear and coal and other forms of energy than probably the rest of the West combined. They're generating more nuclear physicists in a year than what America will churn out, and of better quality in a decade. You are a complete supremacist. This gentleman, Scott Galloway, is a US supremacist, and whilst I'd rather be in America than the UK and Europe, and by the way, this is not being projected on the politicians. I love the UK people, I love the Europeans, I love Americans. We're talking about statism and state of collapse. The financial debt collapse is far more advanced in America than this guy even shows any signs of understanding, and it's quite likely there's going to be a debt-based event, much like there was a pandemic event, which they like to bring out, I'm just noticing, on center-right politicians. Do I care? No, I don't. But it's a habit, you see, because they want you to see bad stuff doesn't happen when they advance the cultural Marxism. That's my theory. I'm speculating. Here you have Bush Sr. got a recession. Clinton got the miracle years when the boomer generation were 47, the most tax productive, even had a surplus for a period. A technical surplus, by the way. Not there's an explanation that needs to go with that I don't care to get into. Then you have Bush Jr. Bush Jr. gets 9/11, and then all the wars that went with it. Then who did you get? You got Bush Jr. got 2 terms, so he was kind of 2001. He took it to 2008. Who was 2000? Obama. Obama got the cleanup squad. He gets to be the guy. I fix Republicans' mess. You see how the Republicans crashed because Bush in his final years got 2008, which was the subprime crisis. That all started with Greenspan running a ridiculously low interest rate environment, saying there's no inflation as we were globalizing and all the workshops of the world were being moved offshore. He allowed a massive inflation of assets, which is the first thing that inflates, not your price of your bread, not your price of your t-shirt that's not gone from being made down your street at a local factory to be made by children in India and Beirut. That's what really happened. Greenspan and the miracle economy of those presidents right back to Carter that run ridiculously low rates caused asset price inflation in the equity market of .com, which also had the internet theme, and the property markets and all of those other things. Asset inflation starts in assets first. Too much sloshing liquidity flowing around, trying to find a yield, excessive hypervaluations. That is what went down here, guys. I'm going to stop here. There's been so much to say. I found so much to say. This is our, let's just say, part 1 of analyzing the macroeconomic environment here with the question what Trump return really means for the world. And is the UK about a collapse question? Brought to you by Steve Bartlett. Steve Bartlett cracked YouTube. Anyone who has 9.2 million subscribers is a flipping YouTube genius. Congratulations to him, Steve. Only one point I'd mention. Stop asking about the number of subscribers. The one that do have a subscribe, the others don't want to, and I always skip forward on it, and you're going to start, it's too repetitive. But you've done a great thing. You've cracked YouTube, bud. Congratulations. Hi to Daniel. Great to see you. Chat on X, etc. Hello, Constantine. You made some great points, but you need to elevate beyond the political. I think you have some suspicions beyond that. Scott, you're a super smart guy in many ways, and in some other ways, I don't know what to say. You're not, the stats don't back some of the things that you're saying and are diametrically full inverted. And that is like an inversion perversion of macroeconomics that I think you need to have a look at. But you're clearly talented and smart and capable guy in many other areas. I just don't think it's macroeconomics. But well done. Anyway, you're an influencer and you're smart. Thanks for watching, guys. Tell me if you want a part 2 to